Okay, welcome everybody for the latest FAN network. Alice Gower from DELWP is going to talk to us about Foresight. It's a new online platform that they've developed over the last year or so, drawing together a whole range of data and looking at it in some different ways. So I probably don't need to say much more than that. You're there, Alice, I take it?
Yes, I am. Hi, Mike.
I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Greg, for inviting me along to speak today about some of the work we've been doing here in Victoria. So my name's Alice Gower. I work in predictive services, and our team, as I'm sure pretty much all of you around the country, manage products, tools and analysts for bushfire, behaviour prediction and also smoke prediction. And yeah, today I'm going to talk about Foresight, so it's been going for almost 2 years now. So to give you a clear understanding of the project, I'm going to describe the needs that we addressed. So I want you to imagine that it's the morning of a day of elevated fire danger and that you're a regional controller in the Hume region in central Victoria, and you've got responsibility to make decisions for the day about resourcing, the timing of the start, the start and finish of standby, and you carry quite a lot of responsibility. When we looked into this situation and the people fulfilling that role, we found that decision makers are actually using about 8 different windows in different applications to get an understanding of the weather and the fuel conditions for their shift. And most of that information was available in the form of static images and tables. And so we realised that there was an opportunity to do something fancier than that. So here's just a little slide showing the development process. So we led it, but we used some external help. So we had a user needs assessment that was conducted back in 16-17, and one of the big recommendations from that was that decision makers wanted products that were sort of integrated, accessible, interpretable, interoperable, interactive. Then we engaged Code for Australia to help us put together a proof of concept application, and then we've now gone further with that and developed it with a software development company, Stock Software. So Code for Australia led us through what we call a user-centred design process, and we were guided by their expertise in understanding and developing an understanding of users. So we talked a lot about operational roles, IMT roles, the different agencies in the state, and we ended up grouping them into 3 groups rather than sort of roles or specific spatial coverage. And we came up with this strategic focus, those with a tactical focus, and those with a technical focus. And the idea being is that this is an application. We wanted an application where a user can use it briefly and quickly and get a very quick appreciation of the conditions, but then also dive deep down into the product and get more information. And everyone using the same product so that we get the same information. And what we came up with is a product called Foresight. We designed a brand, a logo and the brand name, and which has actually been really effective for us in marketing it, and everyone calls it that, and it's made it easy for us to add icons to the Emergency Victoria desktop and and that sort of thing. It's been incredibly effective. So now I'll take you into a little bit about what you get in Foresight. So it's basically we'll have a look at some screenshots in a minute, but it's basically a way of, it's a sort of spatial and temporal product where a range of data sets from different sources are shown in the one interface. So we've got the gridded weather from the Bureau of Meteorology, which we get in Victoria on a 3 kilometre by 3 kilometre grid across the state. And then that's the weather forecast here. The CFA in Victoria produced the curing map. In DELWP, we've got some internal data sets. So we've got one called FireMod and another one called Firecast, which are calculated daily. They're more sort of fire behaviour outputs based on gridded weather. And then there's also the real-time observation. So all of that data is rolled into the one interface. So if we have a look at the product here, we've got time later actually screen share it, and I can show you in any more interactive way. But just here you've got, you can zoom in and out, you can pan in the map, and then we've got a range of indicator layers. And the idea is that it gives users a really nuanced hour-by-hour picture of the weather forecast. So here we have a map of the fire danger ratings for each of the incident control centre footprints in Victoria. So you can see that Wangaratta and Shepparton have the highest fire danger ratings for that day. And then that FDR is then linked to policies and procedures in Victoria regarding resourcing and response times in those areas. At the moment, these are set for the day, but then Foresight gives us the ability to be able to zoom in in a temporal sense and see how conditions change. So here we have the Forest Fire Danger Index on a typical fire weather day in Victoria, playing across the sort of the peak conditions of the day. So that's, rather than just seeing this information in a table and summarised for your incident control centre footprint or your region, now people can say, oh, well, it's greater in the west, or it's peaking at 4 p.m. Now, this may take a little moment to get going. Here we've got an image showing the wind. So wind speed is the colours underneath, and then we've got the vectors over the top showing wind speed and direction. It's not actually playing. What I might do at this point is just share screen. And I've gone to the live application here. It might take a moment for it to come up for you. And on monitor, here we go. Sorry. Let's see if that works. I'm just testing it here in the room at the same time. Yep. Okay, so hopefully you can see a map of Victoria. And the wind vectors going across the state. So we've got the forest fire, the maximum forest fire danger index for every cell displaying there. Maximum fuel-based FDI, so it depends on whether it's grass or forest. And you can see on the right-hand side we've got all of the different indicators that are available, including the sort of standard bushfire weather indicators and then some of the internally calculated ones. Let's flick back here. Sorry. There we go. So an extra feature we have is the ability for a user to click anywhere in the map and then get information about that cell. So here someone's clicked sort of up in around Swan Hill, and they've got this little pop-up, and then so that then gives you the numeric information for that live indicator layer. And then what people can do is even open a graph of some mediograms for that point. So previously in Victoria we had a series of mediograms that were produced internally, but I think there was only about 10 points around the state that we did it for. So now in theory you can sort of click anywhere in the state and get your mediogram. So we've got a couple of layers in Foresight, and unfortunately they're not actually live at the moment in the online version, but we hope that they will be soon. But I've got some slides showing them here. So we've got in that diagram back a few slides where I had the different inputs. One of them was called Firecast, and so Firecast uses a Phoenix RapidFire simulation. So you can see a simulation, just a single simulation here on the left-hand side. So using dynamic topographical, fuel and weather inputs. And what we have set up in Victoria is a system where each day within a cloud computing system we've got over 200,000 of these virtual fires ignited on a 1 kilometre grid across the state at a 1 p.m. ignition time, and then they run until midnight. And then the data from each of those fires is then aggregated, and we can look at that in a couple of different ways. So on this right-hand side here, we've got each cell, the colour of each cell indicates the size of the fire that originated from that point, and it's assuming very minimal suppression. So on this day, we had huge fires. If one started and wasn't suppressed much up in the northwest, that's where the larger ones were. But you get some larger ones also down in the Otways. Another way that we can look at this data is to do sort of an intersection with those burn perimeters and then assets that we're interested in. So here what we've got is an example zoomed in on the Otways. Of those fires in the previous slide, how many houses were intersected by those burn perimeters. So I've clicked on a cell here, and that's the fire that originated in this point in that simulation, impacted 428 houses. So using address points, so there's sort of a few proxies, address points for houses, and then houses as a potential sort of life safety impact. And so, I mean, if we compare the two, it's interesting to see, often where the largest fires are is not necessarily where the fires with the greatest impacts are. So the way that we've run the project is that we tested it last fire season. So for the 2018 fire season in Victoria, we ran a trial, and that was sort of open to, so the product is available to anyone in the bushfire management sector within agencies in Victoria. So anyone that has a fire web login, so FireWeb is the DELWP, or fire management, what do we call it? Forest Fire Management Victoria online web application, but that's also available for people in the Country Fire Authority, and anyone that has that can then access this application. So we put it out there, and we had, I think, I'm trying to remember the numbers now, the number of people that signed up. I think we had 200 and something sign up to the trial, and then we had a range of surveys throughout and a focus group. at the end. So we got a really rich sort of amount of information back from that trial. So we had direct emails, and as well as we ran some analytics and things. So I'll show you some of the results that we got from that. The first one I'm going to show you is a bit of a case study of how Foresight was applied. So every year in January over the Australia Day weekend, there's a music festival held near Lexington, which is, I think it's just in here somewhere, just south of Avoca. And it's a 4-day electronic music, art and lifestyle festival with about 12,000 people, with open-air camping, and it's next to State Forest, and it's got sort of limited transport and communication. And here's just a Google Earth, some Street View photo of that area. So you can imagine in the middle of summer, we've got fully cured grasses and sort of box iron, barky flip forest nearby. And so as part of the permit process for this festival, the organisers have an emergency management plan relating to fire, and that relates to the fire danger ratings for the area. However, it's quite close to the divide, and you can see that north of the divide, the fire danger rating compared to south of the divide, this is today actually, it's very coarse and doesn't have that sort of nuanced view. So here we're looking at an hourly fuel-based fire danger rating, and you can see that Foresight gives the ability to see, at a finer scale how the conditions will change at the site. And during the trial last year, one of the DELWP controllers from this part of the world used Foresight to assist with communicating to the coordinators of that festival, and to make sure that they maintained and within their sort of permit conditions. Oh goodness me! Here we go. So another bit of feedback we got. So we had a range of case studies, and then this was my favourite bit of written feedback we got. And I'm a which generation am I? Gen Y. And I got this feedback the day after we launched it, and I thought, oh gosh, I really don't know if that's a good piece of feedback or not. And then I sort of thought, oh gosh, maybe it's a technicolor yawn, and that's a vomit, and maybe people are hating this. But then I Googled it, Urban Dictionary, and apparently a rainbow vomit is something that you do at the site of something amazing on the internet. And so that was quite reassuring. Then from all of the written feedback, and we got a huge amount last year, we assembled a sort of a word cloud, and basically it was just incredibly well loved within the community in Victoria. We did a little bit of analysis from our surveys about which layers people liked the most. Interestingly, fire danger rating per bomb district was the least used, but we're not taking it out. And then this one I think was really telling. So responses to the question, how important do you think it is that Foresight or a product with similar functionality continues to exist in Victoria? And pretty much everyone's saying very important or extremely important, which was great. Here we did an analysis of the number of sessions, so separate logins into the application in the blue bars versus the fire danger rating in Victoria, just an average across the state. But you can see that, there's reasonable correlation between an increase in use and an increase in bushfire conditions, which is what we would hope. So we're at a stage now where we have taken our findings from our trial to our senior managers, and with the recommendations that we should make it a fully operational product and do a few further enhancements, and they've supported that, and so that's what we've done. And the plan for us in Victoria is to sort of apply this continuous improvement process to our products and tools, and Foresight is now considered one of those. One of the interesting outcomes was there was a little bit of tension in some of the feedback about, oh, you could add this, oh, you could add that, and what about if you did that, versus keeping it simple. People recognise that it's an easy-to-use product. They can just log in and make sense of it. And so that's sort of a fine line that we're aware that we need to tread. The other thing we did in our final report was to set out some boundaries about what Foresight is and what it isn't. So going for quality over too much complexity is a priority. At the moment, bushfire readiness is a higher priority than planned burns, but we are going to look at options for supporting planned burn program in Victoria and tweaking the product, whether we have a sort of separate version or just a few extra features in it that help planned burners. We're containing it to the gridded weather forecast period. We're not looking at longer term outlooks or being a product to look back in time, although you can currently go 2 days in the past. And keeping it accurate and keeping it transparent. And obviously the big one for us is it's a user-centred product. All right, so there we are. Maybe we could go to questions. Yeah.
Thanks, Alice.
Thanks, Mike.
Can someone unmute?
The conference is now in conversation mode. All participants are now unmuted.
Does anyone have any questions for Alice?
Yeah, g'day, it's Matt. You can hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Yeah, I think it's a great tool. I've had to play around with it, and just wondering, where does that minutes to 5 hectares come from? Like, I know there's no models out there that do that really. Do you know where that output comes from?
Yeah, good question. So I might just flick over to the application now. Screen sharing. Let's turn it on. So it comes from a product that we have in Victoria. Oh, I've got a. That's all right.
We'll see your password.
Will you?
No.
Oh, I didn't like it. Sorry, let's just see this. So it comes from it's calculated by DELWP in the Technology Solutions Unit. They've got a server module called FireMod, and was set up a few years ago to run it's basically a raster calculator, so it gets data and then runs an analysis using the gridded weather, and then it's got fuel and slope. We're aware that it's not a perfect system, so the fuel layer in it isn't updated readily, like the fuel layer that we use, for example, in Victoria for the residual risk calculation. But I'll turn it on. So for each cell, there's the calculator then looks at, for the weather for that hour, if a fire was to start in that cell using and it just has a single fuel input and a single slope input for the resolution of you've been 29 minutes. If I open up one, no, we can't see the data underneath. So I don't think that's answered the question very well, I'm sorry, but we're aware that it's not a particularly dynamic input. And so what we're hoping in Victoria, one of the options we have in Victoria, so Firecast isn't on at the moment because it's actually sitting in an Emergency Management Victoria system, and we need to do some, with sort of a trial, we need to do some work there. But what we're hoping is that we can have the fuel data, sort of a more dynamic fuel layer that is going into the residual risk and being updated frequently, is then utilised in this system, and that we can then get a spread calculation from that. I'm assuming it uses just a simple elliptical growth model, but I'm not sure about the underlying features, and we don't have a lot of documentation about it. It was set up a few years back, and because our FBANs like it, and they feel that the minutes to 5 hectares and the head fire intensity layers, which also comes out of FireMod, does give a pretty good indication of potential fire behaviour. We haven't turned it off, but in terms of being scientifically validated and that sort of thing, it's you could probe further. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks. That last bit was pretty much where my concern was, because I guess I know that's a bit of a fire behaviour knowledge black hole there, and just curious as to how it does. But while you've got it up there, another feature I was just wondering if you had, is it possible to get tabular output? Like when you get the point forecast, FBANs would probably benefit if they were doing a manual prediction from having like an hourly tabular kind of presentation of the data in your graphs.
That's a really great question, and so this version here has had a few improvements from the trial version last year, and I've actually got another version that I've been working on developers with, and we're hopefully going to release soon, and that does have tabular data in it. So where that will be is if you click on a point and then you open a Meteogram window, then there's going to be an option up on the up in the top header bar there that you can switch then to tabular version. Yeah, there is already a way that people can get the tabular information, which is to use the fire behaviour spreadsheet. And I don't know if you've got access to those, but they are available on EM Drive, and if you ask it, one of the FBANs, they should be able to direct you to those. They're a little bit clunky because you have to download the gridded weather using a little exe file. But yeah, one of the conversations I've been having with our technical people is to potentially link something like this in with a spreadsheet function, as well as even just the sort of visual tabular thing as a longer term.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for Alice?
John Bally here. I've got one quick one, if that's okay.
Hi, John. You're a bit quiet.
Oh, is that better, Alice?
It's okay, yeah.
Okay. Look, I just wonder if you could, look, great talk. Thanks very much. I wonder if you could just clarify a little bit more the similarities and the differences between FireMod and cast? Because there does seem to be some overlap, but they're not clearly not the same thing.
Yeah, they're not the same thing. So Firecast uses Phoenix, and so it uses a dynamic input, whereas FireMod just uses the input from that cell, and it doesn't then actually do a simulated fire output. So it's really just a raster calculator. So the head fire intensity is if a fire, which is, I've got head fire intensity open there now, if a fire was to burn across that cell and it was a fully developed fire, what would the fire intensity be given the weather and the topography and the fuel at that point? Whereas Firecast, we could extract some of these sort of cell-based information from it, just from the sort of source cell, but then the beauty is that it then does that propagation of the fire beyond that single cell, and it's got a dynamic input that will use, FireMod just uses the weather from that hour. It then won't utilise dynamic weather input and dynamic fuel input.
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So Firecast is really Phoenix and all the richness that you get with that. And FireMod is really, it's like implementing Kevin's spreadsheet effectively.
Yeah. And because it's a bit of a sort of black box for us, the underlying fuel data is a little bit out of date.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And it's quite coarse cells. I think there's a funny cell type because someone from the USA set it up, and I think it was like an empirical, so they're quite coarse cells, whereas the Phoenix one operates on it's 100 by 100. I'm not sure if it's the fuel, the running on 180. The fuel inputs might, the different resolution of the different inputs will vary, and I'm not sure of all of them.
Oh, yeah. So the FireMod, that's sort of set up by the Desert Research Institute. Is that body of work?
It was set up by FireMod was set up by Beaver from the USA or from Canada?
That's good, Yukon, yeah.
Yeah, he came out here a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and did a summer at DELWP.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other questions? No, I'll take that as no. Sounds like 2 questions. You've done well. Thanks again, Alice. And I'm sure you'll be flooded with requests once people think about it. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Alice's email's on the screen if you need to follow up with anything. Thanks for dialing in, and we'll see you again at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alice.
Thanks, Alice.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thanks.